The Tiburon Palace, outskirts of Casimir, Tandak Prefecture, Taldor, mid-autumn, 4718. The bright sun of Axis faded as the chill of Taldor's autumn air enveloped the party. They found themselves in a manicured garden of bronze-leafed oaks and marble statuary, the unmistakable grounds of the Tiburon Palace. Even from here, a little ways off the coast, the sea breeze that Casimir was famous for carried the faint tang of salt water. Before the party could gather their bearings, a squad of armored guards streamed from the palace interior, weapons drawn but hesitant. Their leader, a young lieutenant in the green and blue livery of Taldor, froze mid-step, his expression shifting from alarm to surprise. "Grand Strategos Frascati!" the lieutenant gasped, snapping a crisp salute. The other guards followed suit, bowing low. Diyanah blinked. What?" His hand instinctively moved to Raja, the dire lion pacing at his side. The creature rumbled low, sensing his master's unease. "You are the Grand Strategos, are you not?" the lieutenant continued, his voice steady, despite maintaining a tight grip on his weapons. After recovering from his initial surprise, Diyanah just went with this. "Oh yes, of course," he said as confidently as he could, "and we are here to see the princess." "We had heard you were at the front," said the lieutenant, still unconvinced. "How did you arrive, sir?" "Can't you see our wizard Aurelius is with us?" said Diyanah, suddenly taking a more authoritative tone. "Clearly he teleported us in. Now escort us to the princess at once, or she will hear of the trouble you've given us." "Right away, sir," said the man in a sudden fluster. The lieutenant led the party briskly through the palace's grand halls, their footsteps echoing against polished marble. He led them quickly through the foyer and the antechamber towards the audience chamber where they had gathered before their trip to the Avon prefecture. The Tiburon Palace was as majestic as they remembered it, sweeping colonnades, gilded archways, and tapestries that told centuries of Taldan history. At last they reached a heavy oak door intricately carved with the traditional iconography of Taldor, lions, crowns, and laurels. The lieutenant knocked twice, and other guards within opened the door. Their escort stepped aside, gesturing for the party to proceed. Inside, 3 familiar figures stood around a table in open discussion. Princess Eutropia Stavian, her auburn hair impeccably braided, wore a deep crimson gown. For a moment her eyes narrowed at the interruption, but quickly softened when she recognized her allies. Beside her, the statuesque Grand Duchess Caesara Tiburan stood with arms crossed. Her silver-streaked hair framed a face carved with regal dignity. The third figure, Duchess Martella Lothide, was the first of them to smile broadly and warmly. Dressed in subdued lavender, she, as always, exuded a quiet brilliance, and she was the first to speak. "Thank goodness, our heroes return," she said. "The timing couldn't be better. Guards, please give us the room." As soon as they were alone, Diyanah loosened up a bit, and after briefly glancing at his companions, he said to the 3 ladies, "So, why is everyone calling me Grand Strategos Frascati all of a sudden?" "We have a lot to catch you up on," said Martella. "We'll need a moment to explain. Before that, however, who is that behind you?" Eutropia's gaze swept over the group. Her eyes lingered on the hooded figure at the back. Prince Marius stepped forward, lowering his hood. The room fell silent as his face, so eerily reminiscent of his father Stavian III when he had been younger, came into view. "Hey, sis," he said simply. "I'm alive again." Martella's eyes widened, and Eutropia's expression shifted from confusion to shock. "Marius," she whispered, her voice trembling. "How?" "It's complicated," said Marius, "but I can explain." Eutropia's eyes filled with tears. "Is it really you?" "Yes," he said. "It's me. It's a long story." But Eutropia didn't care to hear it right now. She raced across the room and gave her brother a hug that was more tackle than embrace. She squeezed him tightly. Martella watched all this with patient eyes and said, "You two look like you may need a moment. Why don't you listen to Marius's story and give me a moment to catch our friends up on what they've missed since their trip to the outer planes?" None of the party commented on this. They didn't yet know how much Eutropia had been briefed on by Martella, but evidently she knew they had gone to Axis. Yes, said Eutropia, wiping the tears from her face. "That would be great. I will rejoin you shortly." Martella also turned to the Grand Duchess. "If it's all right with you, Grand Duchess." She didn't finish the sentence. "You wish for a moment alone," said Tiburon. The heroes could see that she seemed a little annoyed. Martella was of lower rank than her, but was more trusted by the princess, so the relationship between the Grand Duchess and the Duchess had obviously gotten a little strained over the last few weeks. She didn't comment further, though. She just acquiesced. "Fine. I'll give you all a moment to catch up, but I'll be back in a couple hours. That should be enough time for Eutropia to find out why her brother is suddenly alive. When we're ready to regroup, I expect to be fully debriefed, Martella. No more secrets, please." Martella nodded and just said, "Thank you." With that, Eutropia, Carius, and Tiberon left the room, leaving it to Martella and the companions. "Please have a seat." The party moved to the seats offered, while Raja opted to lie by Diyanah's chair, his golden eyes fixed on the room's occupants. It was Martella's first time seeing Diyanah with a lion, and she couldn't help but comment on how remarkably well-trained he was. "Yeah," said Diyanah, "he's super domesticated. Now, what's going on?" "Right," said Martella, interlocking her fingers. "Here's what's happened in the last week and a half since you went missing at the Tall Grasses caravanserai. First, Pytherius and his army attacked and took the caravanserai. He successfully incorporated the Yanmas mutineers into his northern army. Then he took and has proceeded to hold the city of Yanmas. Effectively, Pytherius has won the Avon prefecture." Aurelius groaned. "So basically all our efforts in the Avon prefecture were in vain?" "Not quite," said Martella. "Actually, you made some pretty significant wins there. Let me cover some of those. Firstly, Grand Duke Broyce Renjana of the Avon prefecture has declared for the princess. He has taken his house forces, and he has rendezvoused with the Grand Duchess Breatisa Fulspar of northern Tandak. They have combined their forces and deployed various fast-moving cavalry regiments to harass Pytherius' forces on his march through the Kriris prefecture. Because," she said, and she indicated the map in the center of the table, "here wooden tokens of black rams, the heraldic symbol of House Pytherius, were being used to denote the movements of their enemy forces, and wooden tokens of white lions, the symbol of Taldor, were being used to denote Eutropia's forces. Since Pytherius lost Carius, he's had his southern forces hold the line at our southern border, preventing us from repositioning our forces northwards, while his northern army advances through the Kriris prefecture. His aim is ultimately to reach the Tandak prefecture, where he knows Eutropia is holding up with Grand Duchess Tiberon. He is hoping for a military victory now." The party nodded. This all made sense. He had lost Prince Carius, and the support, whether direct or indirect, that he had been receiving from Penavar Lothid and the Immaculate Circle had most likely been undercut since Penavar's death. And winning the favor of Grand Duke Renjana was not your only victory in the Avon prefecture. Pytherius had to take Yanmas by force. But of course it was not lost on the people that it was you that solved the city's woes. You were the ones that exposed the Sakils, you tracked the cavalry, you won the people's hearts and minds. "Well, that's good to hear," said Aurelius, "but hearts and minds don't win wars." "The will of the people matters," said Martella, "even in Taldor. In fact, that brings me to Diyanah. You see, tales of your deeds began to spread through the northern prefectures. Your names started to become household names among the loyalists of Taldor. You're a pretty recognizable group. Baron Aurelius Betinos, the saviour of Marat County, his trusted confidant Demi of northern Tandak, a bard of unmatched wisdom, his trusty knight Sir Marius of Whitemarch, and of course the mighty monk Diyanah of House Frascati, whose family name is known through all the corners of Taldor thanks to the fine quality of the wine his family makes. Diyanah also became doubly synonymous with Taldan's strength when it became known that he had a pet lion, which people of course love." Diyanah liked this story so far. "I can see how I might serve as an impressive symbol of Taldor." "Well, wait, because there's a little more," said Martella. "Don't get too excited just yet." He stopped and listened some more. "Word of your deeds had begun to spread, and your name spread as well. And so, of course, back in Sofra Prefecture, which is smack dab in the middle of Pytherius country, Grand Duke Urginus Vobilar, who is slavishly loyal to Maxillar, had your brothers and their family arrested, Diyanah. They are being held somewhere in Sofra, maybe under house arrest at the vineyards, maybe somewhere else. Speaking of which, he's claimed your vineyards for himself, and he has relabeled your wine as wine from the Vobilar vineyards." "Bastard," said Diyanah. Real anger was in his eyes. "Meanwhile, with Grand Strategos Pytherius advancing towards our center of power here in the Tandak prefecture, it became clear that Princess Eutropia had to stop waiting to see if the situation would resolve itself politically. It won't. Our position is that Princess Eutropia is actually Grand Princess Eutropia, and that therefore Pytherius is considered an enemy of the state, and the title of Grand Strategos should be given to someone loyal to the Grand Princess. At the same time as we reach this conclusion, we also recognize that our most trusted military mind was neither human nor technically Taldan. I'm referring, of course, to your friend Rankle. But Rankle is nothing if not proficient at impersonating people. And also, it wouldn't do for Eutropia's famous 4 heroes to disappear so soon after our withdrawal from the Avon prefecture. And in light of Vobilar's unpopular decision to imprison Diyanah's family, well, after some deliberation, the princess and I thought there would be no nomination to the position of Grand Strategos more popular than the famous monk Diyanah Frascati. Diyanah still looked slightly confused. Wait, so Rankle has just been pretending to be me this whole time? Yes, exactly, said Martella. He's been leading our harrying forces across the Kriris prefecture, attacking Pythiris' forces and retreating before they have a chance to properly retaliate. He's also been coordinating with both Falspar and Renjana and other allies as well. Oh yes, Count O'Kera has joined him, and so has Lady Lucrezia Marthane, whom I've since learned is the secret identity of the Night Swan of Marat County. As an expert in disguising herself, she's been intermittently playing the role of Demi, or even Aurelius and Marius, to keep up the ruse that you've been doing important missions for Eutropia while you've been away on Axis. Ah, sounds like I'm a pretty good general then, said Diyanah. That's nice to hear. But honestly, I want to know a little bit more about what's going on with my brothers. I wish I knew more, said Martella. I only know they're being held by Grand Duke Vobilar. Our spy network has not been able to determine their exact location. Don't worry, said Aurelius, putting a hand on Diyanah's shoulder. We'll find them and get them to safety. Well, you covered a lot there. Anything else we should know about? Asked Demi. Just that Pythiris' forces will be approaching the Kriris prefecture capital of Meheto soon. We've sent various envoys to him, but Grand Duke Borand Heskelar has wished to remain out of the conflict, so he has sealed himself up in his castle. Rankle and I are worried that Pythiris might be able to take Meheto. If he does, he'll be able to better consolidate and resupply his forces, and the battle for Tandak prefecture will be bloody and awful, and his army is large enough that he actually might be able to beat us. So what's the plan then? Asked Marius. Rankle thinks we should meet him in the field before his army reaches the city. Rankle's been consolidating our forces, bringing in as much of the army from all our northern allies, including Falspar and Renjana, as well as what armies we can collect from our more central allies, Tiberan, Menzani, and Lorsus. That makes sense. It would be better to meet them in Kriris prefecture than to give them a chance to reach Tandak, agreed Aurelius. How much time do we have? I told you that your timing was good. I don't know exactly when, but I'd expect the battle for Meheto Fields to occur within a week. I think it may be the decisive battle in this conflict. It could make or break us. Then we need to join Rankle at the front, said Marius, and we have little time to waste. We're not finished here in Casimir yet, though, said Aurelius. We need to update Martella on what we learned in Axis, and we need to tell her about the Mantle of Kings. Is that the big lion skin coat you're wearing now? Asked Martella. Yes, said Aurelius, and he shifted slightly uncomfortably in it. This is a relic of ancient Taldan history. Demi can share the details of various historical texts with the princess that will verify what I'm going to say. According to ancient Taldan law, in the case of a succession crisis for the position of Grand Prince and Emperor, the Mantle of Kings could be used to determine the rightful line of succession. How so? Asked Martella, suddenly curious. Well, it contains a sliver of the soul of First Emperor Taldaris, and as such it can be trusted to make decisions as he would, explained Aurelius. So what I do, as the named custodian of the mantle now, is I put this on the shoulders of a prospective monarch. And if that person is the rightful, or perhaps a rightful successor to the Lion Throne, then it will glow brightly to signify that the candidate is worthy to be crowned. Martella's eyes widened. Seriously, said Martella. Between this and Carius' support for Eutropia, this could be exactly what we need. If Vinmark can be persuaded, then maybe Eutropia can be crowned in Opara before the battle even happens, concluded Marius excitedly. Yes, said Demi, but based on everything we know about Pythiris, he won't stop. He won't stand down. His army will proceed. Maybe, said Martella, but it will destroy his support. Not to bum everyone out, said Diyanah, but what if it doesn't glow? I mean, what if the mantle decides Eutropia isn't fit to be Grand Princess? I've thought about that too, said Aurelius. And honestly, if that's the case, we just don't tell anyone about the Mantle of Kings. My lot is in with the princess now. I don't care what Taldaris would say about her candidacy. If it benefits us, let's use it. If not, well, she's my Grand Princess all the same. Marius gave a sincere head tilt. I couldn't agree more. There were many more stories to be exchanged beyond this, but after an hour or so, Martella decided she needed a moment with Eutropia before they came back together. About a half an hour after that, Eutropia, Carius, and Tiberan reconvened with the party in the war room. Eutropia's eyes were still tear-stained, but they were clearly happy tears. Marius, though visibly drained, seemed more confident than when the party had first met him. Eutropia spoke first, her voice steady despite the long day. Martella has filled me in on some of the larger developments from your time beyond Taldor. First, let me thank you all, not just for returning Marius to me, but for everything you've done for Taldor. I cannot express how much it means to have such loyal friends and allies as you. The party offered polite bows and murmurs of acknowledgement. Aurelius cleared his throat. Your Highness, as I'm sure Martella indicated, we have critical information from our time in Axis. Something about a relic you found in the Eternal City. Demi nodded. The Mantle of Kings. Aurelius here was named its custodian. If we can use it to affirm your claim, it might help you get crowned before the battle even begins. Eutropia tilted her head. The Mantle of Kings? Aurelius hesitated before explaining. Enchanted by Aradin himself, apparently, a tangible link to Taldor's founding. In theory, it could confirm your legitimacy to the throne. We can't predict how it'll respond, but it seems worth a try. The room fell silent as Eutropia absorbed the information. Let's do it, then. Tiberan cleared her throat. With all due respect, Your Highness, we can debate the mantle's role later. For now, we need a clear strategy to beat Pythiris in the field. Time is short, and we need all the reinforcements we can get. Martella turned to the party, knowing that it would behoove her politically to support her liege lady. The Grand Duchess is not wrong. War is coming, and the odds are not in our favour yet in Quiris. I can call on the Druids, said Demi. Would they fight for us? Asked Eutropia. I had not yet had the chance to debrief you, Your Highness, said Demi, but on the way to the Avon Prefecture I met with High Druid Valanar the Green of the Wildwood Lodge. He would commit his people to your cause, if you would commit to being more forceful with Andoran, to compel them to reduce logging in the Western Verduran, and of course to renew the Verduran Treaty, which I imagine you would have planned to do anyway. Eutropia thought about this for a moment. Friendly relations with Andoran were of critical importance to Taldor, but she only had to consider for a moment, desperate times and all. Yes, Demi, she said. Tell the High Druid I will happily work with him to police stricter measures to reduce logging, within our borders and beyond them. I will certainly do anything I can to protect the Verduran if it is within my power to do so. I'll reach out to Grand Duke Avernathus, said Aurelius. I'll make sure we're supporting our soldiers with as many mages from the arcane schools of Opara as we can. This will be easier to do, however, if we have proven you are the rightful Grand Princess. Grand Duchess Caesara Tiberan seemed relieved at all this. She could see why Eutropia and Martella trusted this group so much. That could be enough to turn the tide, she said. Very well. Let's try the mantle, then. Yes, quite, said Aurelius, and Demi handed to him one of the texts that she had never returned to the Serene Circle. Aurelius spent a few moments reviewing the ancient text, just to make sure he understood every detail of the ritual. The gravity of the moment suddenly hit him. It suddenly felt like more than a test. It was his declaration of faith in Eutropia and the destiny of Taldor. We need a circle of candles, please, instructed Aurelius, and the palace's liveried attendants were put to work, assembling another space in the palace as needed. Soon the room was lit by a dozen candles. In the center, a pedestal had been prepared, adorned with the symbols of Taldor, more lions, laurels, crowns. Eutropia stood before it, her expression a mixture of resolve and vulnerability. Martella and Marius also stood nearby, both their faces tense with anticipation. Grand Duchess Tiberan and the party, all except for Aurelius, formed a broader semicircle around her, each of them solemn and silent. Aurelius stepped forward, the weight of the mantle heavy in his hands. Princess Eutropia Stavian, he began, his voice steady but reverent. This is the Mantle of Kings, an artifact imbued with the wisdom and will of Taldaris, the first emperor. It is said that only one worthy of the Lion Throne can awaken its light. Are you now prepared to accept this test of your lineage and your destiny? Eutropia took a deep breath and nodded. I am ready. With great care, Aurelius draped the mantle over her shoulders. The moment it settled, a hushed stillness filled the room, as though the air itself was holding breath. For an instant nothing happened. Then a soft golden glow began to emanate from the fabric, growing brighter with each passing second. The light was warm and radiant, illuminating the chamber, outlining Eutropia in a halo of gold. It was Prince Marius who broke the silence by saying, I knew it! Through tear-filled eyes, and clapping vigorously. Eutropia's eyes also widened, her hands instinctively rising to touch the glowing mantle. Tears welled in her eyes as well, but she held her composure. Taldaris acknowledges me, she said in a near whisper. I didn't know how much I needed this until this moment. Martella stepped closer. This changes everything. With this, your claim is undeniable. Carius, visibly moved, smiled broadly. I always knew you were meant for this, Eutropia, even when I was a boy. Now, everyone else will as well. Aurelius bowed deeply. Your Highness, the mantle has spoken. You are the true heir to the Lion Throne. We will see you crowned. Now bring me a mirror, he said to the attendants. We are scrying and sending with Baron Ottar Vinmark of Opara. It is time others share in this knowledge. Aurelius's scrying caught the capital's Ulfin Baron and acting head of the Ulfin Guard having dinner, but Ottar took a moment to step aside and address them through the scrying censor. Forgive the interruption, Baron, said Aurelius, but I have urgent news. Princess Eutropia, said Vinmark, who could see the party and the princess. That is a beautiful light show. It is no mere light show, Baron, said Aurelius. After the Exaltation Day massacre, when Pythiris attempted to take the royal palace by force, you and the Ulfin Guard rightly protected the palace. You made a public statement that his situation was unprecedented, and without an intact Senate, the Grand Dukes would need to decide who the rightful Grand Prince of Taldor should be. I can share with you now that this situation is not unprecedented. There is a recourse, and it is the Mantle of Kings. I am its custodian, and I have performed the trial here with Eutropia. Taldaris finds her a worthy successor to the Lion Throne. A bold claim, said the Baron, but I have not heard of this Mantle of Kings, and I have served at the seat of the Emperor for most of my life. It had passed out of knowledge, but not out of our history books. Search the palace library. Demi will give you the names of the texts that will verify our story. Demi spoke up and shared the names of the tomes she had checked out of the library at the Serene Circle in Axis. The Baron considered this for a moment, but there was something in the authority with which Aurelius had spoken that moved him. Very well, he said. We will investigate. Princess, we shall call you via sending when we confirm this unorthodox method. If this is true, come to Opara. We may yet save this country from war. Thank you, Baron, said the princess. You are truly a man of honor. They closed the scrying and sending spells. I will finalize things with the Baron, said Eutropia. Rankle will need his friends in Kreris. What is the fastest way to get you there? My power has grown pretty considerably in my travels, said Aurelius. I can teleport us there. I just need to cast a little scrying spell on our friend Rankle to get a good look at the surroundings, and I should be able to land us right in the middle of the camp. Martella made an expression of pleased surprise. Who would have guessed when Marius agreed to cater that art auction of mine, that I would discover the 4 people on whom the fate of all of Taldor would rest? I wish you all good luck. Then Aurelius drew out the wand of Carry Companion, and Raja, seeing it and already understanding at this point, gave a large lion's yawn and stretched out his fore and hind legs before returning to a seated position. Aurelius waited for Raja to get comfortable before turning him into a convenient figurine for Diyanah to pick up. Diyanah also disguised himself with a trusty hat of disguise from their first ever adventure. If Rankle was impersonating him, it wouldn't do to show up as himself, so he chose instead to present himself as their friend Willem of Elber Creek. And finally ready, the party gathered up, and Aurelius teleported them away. The Loyalist Warcamp, banks of the southern Verdira River, Kreris Prefecture, Taldor, mid-autumn 4718. The war camp was alive with activity when the party materialized, the faint hum of Aurelius's teleportation spell dissipating into the quickly cooling air of the late afternoon. They found themselves at the heart of the Loyalist encampment, which had been spread along the banks of the southern Verdira River. Kreris was picturesque country, especially so in the fall, when all the leaves turned colors of orange and red. It was approaching sunset now, and the gold of the overhead sun was turning crimson as well, bathing the camp in its light, casting long shadows over the rows of tents and the glimmering armor of soldiers moving purposefully between them. Banners of white lions fluttered in the cool breeze. Around the camp, officers barked orders to squadrons of infantry, while cavalry prepared their horses near a makeshift corral. Nearby, a group of engineers worked tirelessly to fortify the camp with wooden palisades and sharpened stakes. The smell of earth and campfire mingled with the scent of cooked meat from the field kitchen on the outskirts. Soldiers paused to glance at the new arrivals, their wary expressions quickly shifting to recognition and murmurs spreading among the ranks. Though Diyanah's disguised appearance shielded him from being immediately recognized, Aurelius, Demi, and Marius were not so easily obscured. "Look, it's the heroes of the tall grasses," a young recruit whispered, her voice excited. Nearby, a grizzled sergeant raised a hand to quiet the others. "Back to your duties," he barked, though he gave a respectful nod to the party before returning to work. Before the group could orient themselves further, a familiar figure strode towards them. It was Rankle disguised as Diyanah. The dark elf was clad in a replica of Diyanah's monk robes, and, of course, his now famous coat of dragon scales. Rankle greeted them with a wry grin, his voice pitched higher to mimic Diyanah's tone. "The heroes return at last! You have excellent timing!" Rankle gestured for them to follow as he led them through the camp. Along the way, soldiers and officers alike saluted him. "I hope you'll forgive the disguise," said Rankle in a soft whisper to Diyanah. "It's been a strange week and a half. Everything changed after Pytherius took Yanmass." "No problem," said Diyanah. "Martella explained everything, though I'd like to take my face back when opportunity presents itself. What's it been like being me, then?" "Weird," said Rankle. "Everyone keeps asking me for wine. I hope you've brought some with you." "I gave the last of it away in Axis, actually," said Diyanah. "And I hear that bastard Vobilar has taken the family vineyards, so I'm guessing there won't be more coming any time soon." "We'll figure that out," said Rankle. "First, though, you all should know we're only days away from clashing with Pytherius on the fields between the Verdira and Creris rivers." Rankle continued as they approached a large command tent adorned with a white lion crest. "Our scouts report that his forces have set up camp by the Creris River, as we have on the Verdira. We're both trying to muster as many forces as possible before we march to meet in the Meheto fields. It's shaping up to be quite the decisive confrontation. We've been using the Verdira to move the Falspar and Ranjana soldiers from northern Tandak to our forward camp. He's been doing the same with the Broken Bridge. We've been harrying his army, but his forces have still effectively taken all the land from Yanmass to the Creris River, including the town of Faldemont in North Creris. He's been reinforcing as he goes. On our side, we've been doing everything we can to assemble our own forces from our various allies." He pulled back the flap of the command tent and ushered the group inside. The interior was lit by a central brazier, its warmth driving away the autumn chill. A massive map of Creris Prefecture lay stretched across the main table, studded with wooden tokens representing Loyalist and Pytherius forces. Around the table stood familiar allies, Count O'Kara, in full combat regalia despite his advancing age. He had assumed command of all of Grand Duchess Tiberan's Tandak Prefecture forces, not just those pulled from Rat County. Two seasoned commanders whose faces they did not recognize, but who wore the symbols of houses Lossus and Denzarni respectively, which immediately identified them as allies that had come from the Yellow Canal, and likely from Eagle's Head in Kazan Prefecture as well. Lastly, there was Gerta Thresh, whose personal dress style, which could only be described as bordering on vagrant, clashed so much with the finely polished armor of the other lords. The party was excited to see her, and Marius gave her a big hug, which caught her a little off guard. Eager to avoid a hug himself, O'Kara gave Marius a stiff handshake instead. "All right," said Gerta stiffly after the embrace. "I've been doing quite well." Rankle smiled heartily in a fine impression of Diyanah. "Gerta is too modest. The Beggarwood bandits are now the Beggarwood Brigadiers. She's assembled a company of rogues and rangers 100 strong. What started with her friends Ginnet, Nanny and Mally Trubo, Penebris and Alaria is now a movement, mobilizing a large number of skilled skirmishers. They've been harassing Pytherius' soldiers from Yanmass to the river, and have only just peeled back now as we regroup." "Turns out soldiery and banditry are not so different," said Gerta grimly. "We've had a few successes." Rankle turned to the two officers in the tent as well. "May I present to you Commander Ovid Gurgis, who was sent to us thanks to the support offered by Duchess Helenara Lossus, and Commander Virgil Appius, leading the forces of Grand Duchess Malia Denzarni." The two commanders saluted. "Lady Demetrius, Sir Marius, Baron Betnos, and Mr. Willem," they said. "Your names are known to us already." I hate to ask this, as I know you were in the middle of something," said Rankle, "but could you all give us the room?" The two commanders simply saluted and stepped outside the command tent. Rankle and Diyanah shifted faces. "It's good to have you all back," said Count O'Kara, "and just at the right time, too. I would also recommend that despite the ruse we've held up, the command remains with Baron Betnos' mysterious valet. He has been keeping his superior force in check all this while, and has done an incredible job of rallying all banners to our cause. I don't mean to underestimate you in any way, Lord Frascati." No, it's actually fine," said Diyanah. "In fact, I'll ask Rankle to wear my face a little while longer. How much time do we have before the battle begins?" "A few days at least. We're getting additional reinforcements from the north tonight, if all goes according to plan. And according to our reports, Pytherius, fearing our growing numbers, will be bolstering his own forces with Galtish mercenaries, according to our spies. He'll likely stay put until those arrive, so we have a little more time to prepare." Great, said Aurelius. So you can do that prep work. Our little group needs to go to Sophra Prefecture. I hate to put our needs first, but my father was killed by Pytherius. I won't have my best friend's brother put to the sword as well. You'll never make it to the south of Taldor before the battle begins, objected Okera. My arcane power has grown in our journey, said Aurelius simply. I can teleport a small group, myself and up to 4 others, hundreds of miles if I need to. I also grew up in the Sophra Prefecture with Diyanah, so I know the land. We can be there, save his family, and be back before the battle begins. We'll also still have time to recruit additional allies of our own. We'll win this, Okera. Count Okera nodded. Well, I've come to trust your judgment, Baron. Glad you'll be with us for the battle. Pytherius has considerable arcane power of his own. Just then a woman stormed in. It was Lady Lucrezia Marthane, wearing combat leathers, but not dressed in her guise as the Night Swan. She walked straight up to Marius. Marius, she said accusingly, I have a bone to pick with you. What did I do? Asked the half-orc indignantly. Okera chuckled at this and raised his arms, palms up. I will leave you all alone to catch up as well on this note. He stepped out of the command tent. Well, it's nice to see you too, said Marius. Lucrezia put her hands on her hips. For almost a month I wrestled with myself about what to do with Bartleby Lothede, locked away in Okera's dungeon. Back and forth I went. My desire, no, I would say my instinct, was that Lothede had to pay for the injustices brought upon the county of Marat. I should just take justice into my own hands. Well, every time I thought about doing that, I heard your annoying gruff voice in the back of my head, telling me to stay my hand. She paced angrily before Marius. Well, guess what, Marius? Sir Ghoul broke Bartleby out of prison, and now they've joined up with Pytherius and assembled a force of other northern malcontents of a traditionalist disposition. Oh, so you didn't kill him, said Marius with a genuine smile on his face. How are you smiling right now? Didn't you hear what I just said? Lucrezia kept getting agitated. Because he's alive, and we'll have to face him again. We gave him a chance. He failed to pay for his crimes. Now we'll face him in the field, said Marius. The right thing to do is rarely the thing that makes us feel best. Gods, you're insufferable, said Lucrezia, throwing her hands in the air and striding out of the tent. Diyanah watched this whole display, and at the end of it he put a hand on Marius's shoulder and said, You know, I think she kind of likes you. Marius chuckled. Yeah, I think she does too. Then a signal horn blew, and Rankle turned to them. That signals our reinforcements are here. Come, let's see what the northern Grand Dukes have brought with them. Outside the camp, 6 low-draft riverboats were pulling up on the river, and a number of soldiers were jumping off and pulling the boats up onto the banks. They had brought a significant fighting force, Renjana's elite mountain warriors, and Falspar's northern Tandak rangers, along with horses for their respective cavalry regiments. The leaders stepped off the boats as well. Grand Duke Broyce Renjana had come to the front to fight this decisive battle against Pytherius himself. As he stepped out to meet the party, he clasped hands with Diyanah, who was now himself as the new Grand Strategos in front of the entire war camp, and he felt a strange surge of pride in his heart. Well met, Grand Duke, he said, unable to stop himself from switching to the language of the Taldan soldiery now that he had been catapulted into this unexpected position of leadership. Well met, Grand Strategos Frascati, said Broyce. Quite a promotion since we last spoke. And where is the mighty lion Raja? He's with me, as always, said Diyanah, and then he pulled out the figurine and tossed it on the ground. Suddenly there was Raja standing there for all to see. It turned its head and roared a roar so loud it caused some of the horses to jump. Behold the symbol of Taldor, noted Broyce proudly. He knew that Raja had come from his own Yanmas stables, and he was quite proud of the beast. He turned to his own troops. We shall win this day, and we shall take back our lands and cast Pytherius out of the Avon prefecture for good. His soldiers saluted and gave a loud hurrah as he said this. Broyce was also followed by his own son Byron and his cleric advisor Patrina. My company has been on the march for some time, he said in a lower voice to Diyanah, not intended for the war camp. We need to rest. I don't suppose you have any of your family's famous wine that you might share with us. I'm embarrassed to say I'm all out of wine at the moment, said Diyanah, but I promise to remedy that by this time tomorrow. Good, said the Grand Duke. I'll hold you to it. He turned to his soldiers and instructed them to begin making camp for themselves, and familiarizing themselves with the rest of the allied forces. Behind Grand Duke Renjana came Grand Duchess Breatis of Falspar's forces. The Grand Duchess had not come herself, choosing instead to remain behind in the North Tandak prefecture. However, Demi was surprised to discover that she had entrusted command of the Falspar forces to her middle daughter, Lady Miria Falspar. Demi raced out to meet Miria when she descended from the boat. "Demi!" she cried, and though obviously some part of her wished to greet Demi more formally in front of her own soldiers, she couldn't help but hug the android as they met on the banks of the river. "Why are you here?" asked Demi. "Because I'm the commander of the Feldspar forces," said Miria sternly. Demi paused with concern. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" "Am I sure?" asked Miria with frustration in her voice. "Demi, you know I've always been the strongest of my sisters. Brianna, she was always destined to be Grand Duchess. Celine, her gifts are with the arcane, and mine have been with the sword. This is where I put my gifts to use. I spent weeks arguing with my mother. I'm not going to argue with you as well." No, you're not," said Demi, fighting the tears in her eyes, as she couldn't help but adjust the hairs on Miria's face. "Fight with strength and honor. Make your family proud," Demi said at last. Then Demi turned to Miria's soldiers and said, "Some of you may know me, others may not. I am Demetria of Numeria, immortal guardian of the Feldspar line. Commander Miria Feldspar will lead you to victory. For the Feldspars, for North Tandak, for Taldor." Her soldiers cheered as Miria held up one of Demi's hands in triumph. That night, the heroes feasted with the soldiers. They spent a restless night in the war camp, and before the crack of dawn, Aurelius was on his feet again, studying a selection of spells for their journey to the Sofra prefecture. Demi approached Aurelius in the middle of his studies. "You seem even more determined to do this than Diyanah does," she noted. "Are you all right?" "It's just that I've already lost someone to Pythierius' ambition. I don't want Diyanah to have to go through that too." He snapped shut his spellbook. "Could you wake everyone else up? I'm ready to go." Demi nodded at him. This little side quest of theirs would take them deep into the heartland of Pythierius-controlled territory, the border prefecture of Sofra, and the lands both Diyanah and Aurelius had grown up in. End of chapter. Hi there, thank you so much for watching. You've just watched Season 5, Episode 1 of my Pathfinder 616 War for the Crown series. That's right, it is the premiere of my Season 5. Our heroes have finally left the eternal city of Axis behind, and they are returning to Taldor, and the name of this episode is Return to Taldor. Like most of my season, or Episode 1, or season premieres essentially, this is largely a setup episode where we're kind of setting the stakes for everything that needs to happen in the course of this season. As we've talked about in previous post-episode recaps, the major change that I made was that I switched books 4 and books 5. My heroes gained fewer levels in the course of book 3 than is designed in the books, and so I think it's basically 3 levels per book. So book 1 is 1 through 3, then it's 4 to 6, 7 to 9, culminating in 16 to 18, but I gave them only 2 levels over the course of book 3 and 2 levels over the course of book 5, which took my book 4 slot. So actually they were more or less right leveled for this book. They were maybe one level a little bit higher than they should have been, so I did add a few more villains, but I found that I could mostly run this because of the way that I sort of doled out the levels. I could mostly run this as written. But because of the scenario had changed, there were some pretty major changes in terms of my approach. So let me start by sort of explaining what happens in the books, which is basically that in the books, the heroes apprentice with the Lion Blades. They go into Zimar, and Pythierius, he actually doesn't attack and take the Avon prefecture in the books. He's still kind of plotting his stuff, and then they infiltrate Zimar, and they go in and they hunt down Pythierius. And obviously my story had taken a completely different direction. Pythierius had taken the Avon prefecture, his army was closing in on the Tandak prefecture. I knew that I wanted this season to culminate in kind of a big battle, and I also liked that I got to use Kriris prefecture, which is the prefecture that lies between Tandak and the Avon prefecture. That was where my big battle was going to happen. Maheddo is a really interesting city. It's a Taldan city, but it was built by dwarves. I thought it was cool that I'd be able to go there and make that a part of my story. But so I knew that this season would take place in 2 places. It would take place partly in Zimar, which is where the core adventure takes place, and then partly in the Kriris prefecture where this big battle was going to take place. And the other thing that had happened in the course of this adventure that sort of enabled me to do this is that Aurelius had picked up the teleport spell. So they could basically be jumping back and forth between the southern area where a lot of the adventure takes place, and where the big battle was going to happen while they were sort of preparing for the big battle. So once I had that sort of basic structure figured out, the next thing to do was to figure out why, if Pythaeus was in Cretus Prefecture, the party would want to go to all the way down to Zimar. And the answer that I ultimately settled on was I was going to have both Aurelius and Diyanah come from the Sofra Prefecture. They come from a place very close to the city of Zimar. So that's where this whole storyline that Diyanah has been named Grand Strategos came from. And I knew that as a consequence of some of those decisions, I was going to have Diyanah's family be kidnapped, and that would serve as the impetus for the whole group to travel to Zimar, to have this little adventure, and to meet some other affiliates of the Immaculate Circle, the Rakshasa, which we will see in some upcoming episodes. And that's how we ended up with this kind of structure. So structurally, it's a little bit different from the book as written, but in the broad strokes, I largely keep to the various encounters and adventures in sequence. It's just what they're hunting for is a little bit different. That's basically all I got for you today. I hope you enjoyed this kind of quick GM update. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.